Check out the Full Press Hockey Podcast with Jim Biringer, the best in the business. It's going to be great.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the Full Press Hockey Weekly Rumors Podcast. We are back. Jim Biringer, David Calabretta. Guys, it's been a while. The fans have been itching for it. They've been asking for us. The dynamic duo is here once again. We got a lot to talk about. It was a lot of playoffs. We're a little quiet around the rumor mill. But now, as some teams get eliminated, as the seasons wind down, we're getting back and hammering this thing out. David, welcome back.
It feels good to be back, man. It's been a while. A lot of news coming up.
A lot of news. And first off, we're going to start up, in Montreal, because that's what we do. Montreal Canadiens. Hell of a season, hell of a run to close it out, make the playoffs. Yeah, they lose in 5 games. Probably should have gone 6, but that Tom Wilson hit changed kind of that entire series and that game. But to me, I think the Montreal Canadiens, I said at the beginning of the year, they should have been playing meaningful hockey. They did. And the cherry on top was making the Stanley Cup playoffs this year. They took advantage of some bad teams, but kudos to that team. And there's a reason why Martin St. Louis is up for the Jack Adams Award.
Yeah, it's been a season to be proud of for Montreal, right? Like, no one really expected them. You did. You believed in them since the start. That's for sure. But, the East, Montreal was slipping away with it. Then, it went right down to the wire because they started going on a little losing streak. You get Ivan Demidov. You see what he's all about. He's exciting. Obviously, the playoffs is a whole different beast. And he got some valuable experience. But, it's pretty evident what they're missing, to be that consistent playoff team and to still be playing in the month of May. But like I said, exciting future. And it's going to be a busy offseason in Montreal.
Yeah, definitely exciting future. You look at it and you got a kind of glimpse of that future, right? Because on that power play in game 4, you had Cole Caulfield on one side and Ivan Demidov's one timer on the other side. Like that, I know Patrick Laine got hurt and you don't want to talk about injuries affecting, your roster spot. Well, we've talked about this on this podcast before about Kirby Dach and his, future with this team because of injury and everything in his play. But you look at it and you're saying, all right, so where's Patrick Laine going to be? Because he may not be on the first power play anymore.
No, like I said, obviously that injury bugged him a bit, and he was money on that. He was money on that left side. But, if you looked at game 4, you kind of got the idea that that's what we're going to roll with next year because it's so fluid, their power play. It's not a one-man show. The teams were kind of catching up to Laine. They were like, you know what, they're only going to pass to him. Their only threat was really him on that left side. So, there's still a spot for Laine, but I don't know about that first unit. But
no, and I give credit, like Kent Hughes even said it, like, because there's been a lot of question marks about Laine's play. And I give credit to Kent Hughes during his media availability where he said, look, if it wasn't for Laine, they don't make the playoffs. And he's right, because if you look at when Laine came back into the season, the Habs were on that losing streak, 31st in the league, and then they just took off. So those wins in December really propelled the Canadiens, and he's definitely a big part of it. But my takeaway is that the Canadiens and the management staff led by Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes, they're not satisfied, and I think we all know what they're looking for is second line center.
Yeah, second line center, maybe another right hand D, someone to replace David Savard. Because you can't really roll into the season with 5 young D again. But yeah, number 2 center, top 6 forward, that's the priority for Montreal. They mentioned yesterday that if they could find someone who could produce and is not necessarily a center on the second line, maybe they'll look towards that. But maybe that's just a move to show teams that we're not that desperate, even though we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of options on the second line center. You could go to the Islanders, who just got the first overall pick. Maybe they're going to be willing to trade Bo Horvat, Matt Barzal. It depends which GM takes over. Sidney Crosby, the dream one,
Yeah.
If he says he wants to leave, but that's in a few years. But no, there's going to be a lot of options, but it's going to be a hefty price. But Montreal has the assets to do a trade like that.
Yeah, and the other takeaway was that they want to do a hockey trade too. It's like that's something we talked about leading up to the trade deadline when Dylan Cousins' name was out there. But the problem is Montreal, it was tough for them because in division, the assets, what were they going to really give up for a guy like Cousins? But the fact that they're looking to make a hockey trade, even though you have Joel Armia as free agent, Dvorak free agent, those are some tough guys to replace, especially Armia because the penalty kill with him and Jake Evans really good. I like that they're going to stick to everything, but they know what they need to do. And I expect the Canadiens to do what they've done the last couple of years in the offseason is come out of nowhere and make a move no one saw coming, because that's what Montreal does.
Yeah, but this time it's got to be a player who's, already proven, not necessarily a project. It's been Dak, Newhook, Line A. It's someone who we got paid to take on his contract. I think now they're going to look at someone who's age appropriate, but also someone who's proven that he could get us 60, 70 points in the league. But like I said, Montreal has the options, but they also don't want to deviate from their plan. They don't want to just go all in and trade everyone just to have a good team. It's going to take time, but, like I said, future's bright.
Right. And again, like the big thing is you don't want to deviate the plan. You don't want to say that, oh, hey, look, hey, we got beat up. We need to get size. We need more skill. We need this. Oh, we need to go on and make the playoffs next year. Yeah, well, you do need to make the playoffs next year, because next year is when you're realistically supposed to make the playoffs in Montreal. Like, let's be honest, because Slavkovsky's new deal kicks in July 1st and Caden Gooley's deal kicks in July 1st. And obviously, they're going to want to sign Hudson to an extension because he's going to win the Calder Trophy as NHL Rookie of the Year. And if he doesn't, then, well...
Screw on the Raiders, man.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I'm going to throw it out there. I put Hudson 1. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that or say that. I don't know what the rules are anymore, but it seems like everybody's putting ballots out saying who they voted for and how they did it. So, but anyway, I put Lane Hudson 1. Everybody knows our opinion. The
fans love you, man.
Well, you know what? I call it as it is, man. And the kid, ties a rookie record for most assists by a defenseman, most points in franchise history by a rookie defenseman. He changed the game back there for the Montreal Canadiens. And is a bright future ahead with him. And, it just stinks that Sam Montembeault got hurt in the playoffs because he's the number one. But again, I think we've talked about this too. As much as I think Jacob Dobesh is going to be good and Fowler is going to be good for them, you got to get a reliable, sturdy backup goaltender for this team, because Montembeault cannot play 60 games a year.
No, he didn't. He cannot. But he also proved that he is a number one goalie. That's something that I think a lot of people question that, but I do agree that they need a backup in some sort, because, like I said, Jacob Dobez, great the way he came in and took over from Montreal, won some big games against Colorado, Washington. But again, in the playoffs, you need someone who's been there before, and the experience, it showed the lack of experience on Jacob Dobez, even though he didn't play horrible. But, you need that guy who's a bit more confident in that in case it happens.
No, exactly. So, I mean, the future is bright for the Montreal Canadiens. They have some things that they need to work on, like every team does. And obviously, we mentioned his name before, Jeff Gorton. Like, there's, general manager jobs out there, president of hockey jobs. But he's the vice president of the Montreal Canadiens right now. And he's putting a good rebuild together with Ken Hughes. He left New York prematurely the first time. Should have never been let go, because the owners had some outside noise and very volatile, and got his expectations through the roof because of the COVID bubble, because the Rangers would have missed the playoffs anyway. So everything would have been fine. He was doing things the right way, and you could clearly see what he had in mind is working in Montreal.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think, I don't want to shut off the rumors, but I don't think he'll be going anywhere either. He didn't get to see the rebuild finish in New York. Why would he want to leave before it finishes in Montreal? He wants to come here, and him and Ken Hughes have been an amazing duo, and a lot more to come.
Yeah, I mean, look, they got big plans. They got big opportunities, potential maybe offer sheet for the Canadiens this summer. Maybe with the right guys, you never know. Maybe a guy like Marco Rossi's out there. You never know. He could fit it. He could fit in with this Montreal team. I think that would be a nice fit for them.
Yeah, for sure. Marco Rossi. It doesn't sound like someone who's staying in Minnesota too long. I don't know what the hesitance is, but he keeps impressing me every single game, even in the playoffs. Doesn't play like he's 5'9". That's for sure.
And he doesn't play like he should be on the fourth line either.
No, not at all.
Not at all whatsoever. So, going to be interesting times in the city of Montreal in the summer. They're going to stick to their plan and stick to the rebuild. We move out Western Canada because we've documented also the Vancouver Canucks a lot this year too, and another mess. Too much drama led to JT Miller being traded. Now Jim Rutherford continues to put his foot in his mouth when it comes to talking about Quinn Hughes potentially not being there. He's like, well, I have a year and like couple 2/3 to get this resolved. No, you don't. You have a year. You have till July 1st, 2026 to figure out if Quinn Hughes is staying in Vancouver. Rick Tocchet leaves. He doesn't want the drama anymore. We don't know what's going on with Elias Pettersson. They want to keep him, don't want to keep him. Brock Besser, they decided not to keep, but he's going to be a free agent because they don't respect him enough. Just a lot of drama plus adding goalie. It doesn't end. It doesn't end. The drama's been going on since 2011 in Vancouver.
Yeah, like you would think that it would have ended after the JT Miller saga and Pettersson would go back to his form and Jim Rutherford maybe would sew his mouth shut. But, it's just getting worse in Vancouver. And, like, I'm expecting the worst. I'm expecting an implosion in Vancouver. And I don't want to be that guy, but it looked so good a year ago. They were one of the best teams in the West. They had a decent playoff run. Obviously, they got bounced by the Oilers, who made the final. And now it just from 100 to 0, like explosion. And your team is involved in this drama because apparently Quinn Hughes wants to be a New Jersey Devil, according to his own president.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think he said the thing out loud that I think everybody figured was that the Hughes brothers wanted to play together. The Hughes brothers have probably wanted to play together since Luke got drafted, and they've all been together. But you don't say it out loud.
Like, I figured maybe the Olympics. Obviously, I didn't really think that he would be a New Jersey Devil in a year. No, and now there's a possibility that it could be before next year. I mean, if the Devils are going to want to do it, I mean, yeah, you're going to give up assets, and you're going to have to. You're going to have to give up Nemec or Casey or Silashev and Mercer and the first. Like, you're going to have to give up something. Right now, you don't have a first this year, but you're going to have to figure out a way to make it happen because – and the thing is like we've said it, JT Miller trade, yeah, they didn't win it. You're not winning a Quinn Hughes trade. You're not winning an Elias Pettersson trade. And if Quinn Hughes' only destination is New Jersey because Jack and Luke Hughes are not going to Vancouver. So let's like put that out there. Like, that's not happening. There is nothing they could give up for that to happen. Let's make that clear. Yeah, like, that's not happening. And I also want to say one thing too. I feel like you're going to see it as well. Jim Rutherford's comments just gave the Devils a huge advantage because they have all the leverage in the world. Yeah, anyway. They do. You said it. Like, I was going to say, they have the leverage. Like, if Quinn Hughes' only destination is New Jersey, the Devils are going to be like, well, this is what we're giving you. Or we wait till he walks. Yeah, exactly. Or we wait till he walks because we're going to have to pay him anyway. Right? Yeah. Like, you bring him on, you're going to have to give him an extension anyway. And then Luke Hughes is doing an extension. Look, yeah, you can probably give up some pieces for your future to get that. But if you're going to add a true number one defenseman on your roster, something you haven't had since Scott Niedermayer, Scott Stevens days, you do it. Yeah, do you think that there's a bit of a distraction having three brothers on the same team? I mean, I think if they do it right, if they add him, like, I'm not saying they add him this summer, but if they add him the following summer, get it out of the way, introductory press conference, put them all up there, and that's the only time you talk about it. Yeah, for sure. That's it. That's it. It won't be the only time it'll be talked about by the media, but no. At least in New Jersey, it would be because we get it over with. This is what happens, and if you want to invite the Canadian press down for it too, then do it because that's the only thing they're going to talk about if it happens when they go back to Vancouver. Look, it's a hit or miss, but at the end of the day, if you have the chance to bring in a franchise defenseman, you do it and you don't turn back. Right. And I saw the trade proposal that was like talked about, the hypothetical one where Demko's going the other way, Wallander and Pettersson. Devils are not taking on Demko. They already have enough goalies as it is. Like, yeah, and they have a damn good one in the playoffs. Yeah. Oh my God, Jacob Markstrom. Yeah, Jacob Markstrom's going to be doing extension too. So I mean, I think he'll get like a couple of year extension, little bit more, maybe like $7 million or something. But he'll get a nice extension. That way you can get Nico Dawes or whoever you're bringing in as a backup to just give more time to develop, and then you have that kid at BU as well. So And to continue with Vancouver, I have more stuff to say about them because it's making me so angry. Tom Willander, your best defensive prospect, he's gone too now. He might be gone.
I don't know. They didn't even sign him yet. They were gonna sign him. He was gonna sign his NHL.
He might walk. So what is going on, Vancouver? Let's figure this out.
There's an issue in Vancouver for a long time. Like, what's the message? What's the message? Because the Winnipeg Jets figured out what their message was, and I think it's just from management just not handling things the right way. Like, you wanted Rick Tocchet, you made Bruce Boudreau, you figured out a way to just get him out of there. The players loved him, and all of a sudden now he's not there. And you wanted Tocchet, and Tocchet didn't even want to stay because you didn't give him an option. Oh, because you thought you were going to negotiate. Now he's like, nah, I don't want to stay. I'm out. It's like what is going on in Vancouver right now?
Yeah, they need to take it one step at a time. I think they're going from one place to another, from Tocchet to Willander to Hughes. They really have to slow down and take it one day at a time because, I don't have many good things to say about that city right now, unfortunately. Because I love their fans and I love their city. I love their organization, but it's a mess right now.
It is. It's a complete mess. And it's going to be a continue because they brought this drama on themselves, like the New York Rangers brought the drama on themselves. Like, let's be honest. Like, whether Peter Laviolette's going to get fired or not, we really don't know. If the season played out, the way it would have played out, none of the trades happened. Maybe they missed the playoff. Maybe they make the playoffs. Maybe they make a coaching change. We don't. Chris Drury is the reason why the coaching change happened. The players, we've documented it. The players mutiny, didn't like it with Trouba, didn't like it, with Barclay Goudreau, Capo Caco gets traded, all that stuff. Chris Drury brings in inferior players to the talent that went out, gets a contract extension, hires Mike Sullivan after getting rid of Peter Laviolette and Phil Housley, and they think that this is going to solve the problem of the roster. There's issues on that roster. Oh, by the way, Mika Zibanejad is like, well, I'm really not going to go anywhere because, my contract says I don't have to. Well, buddy, the Rangers don't care about your no move clause. You kind of need to know about that right now.
We've seen that already.
Like, they don't care. And by the way, Roberto Luongo, speaking of Vancouver, he said his contract sucks and he ended up going to Florida. So no move clause don't mean nothing. But the Rangers got to figure out what their direction is and who they are and what their identity is because they have pieces that really should be moving out of that locker room this summer.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's exciting getting Mike Sullivan in the sense that what he's brought to Pittsburgh. But this is the same Mike Sullivan who played Chris Kreider over Kyle Connor in the Four Nations final. So if you're a Rangers fan and you don't like Chris Kreider, well, I think your coach likes him. But let's just, that's one thing. But also, I think the Rangers, it's been a problem since the start, and we've been saying it in every podcast. From as soon as the season started, putting your assistant captain on waivers to get rid of his contract, and then Chuba saying this is our last chance as a core to get something done. He gets dealt, your captain gets dealt. There's so much drama in the locker room. It's been a disaster from the start, and it's starting to clear up a bit, but there's still some holes to fix in New York.
Yeah, there's a big hole to fix. It's called drafting and developing and playing your young players, and they don't do it enough. Like, they legitimately don't do it enough. And you see Capo's thriving in Seattle, right? Like, he's playing great with the Kraken. Filipino, too bad he had the injuries, but he was playing really well in Vancouver. Lafreniere took a way big step back after that contract. Too many distractions with his contract, with Igor's contract. Shesterkin gets the big money. But if the defensive system doesn't change in front of your goaltender, the $11.5 million goalie is going to face 45 shots a game. And here's my issue with Mike Sullivan. Yeah, he won back-to-back Stanley Cups. That's 2016, 2017. That's 8 years ago. The Penguins won one playoff series, had multiple leads against the Rangers in 2022 in games 5 through 7, multi-goal leads, and lost.
They lost it. They also lost to the 2020 Montreal Canadiens in a play-in round.
They had no business losing to.
When they were in their peak. So, no, Sullivan hasn't had a great track record since that Stanley Cup. And it's not a knock on him. You do need change, and you do need a guy who's respected. So maybe that will work out. But even going back to the Rangers defense, they just let the players walk in. That
Yeah.
was their game plan this year. And then the same thing with Gabe Perreault. They signed him. They took him out of college and they ended up scratching him in must-win games. So, I hope they figure it out, especially with their rookies, because they've had no shortage of rookies coming in, and they just haven't lived up to the hype because they don't play.
No, they don't play. Offman, another guy, plays on the fourth line, right? Like Lafreniere's got to be playing on the first line. They got to figure it out. It seems like it's Miller and Trocheck down the middle. They're going to have to figure out the wings right now. And Artemi Panarin's situation, like, he's got a year left on his deal. Do they decide that it's time to move on from him and all his drama?
Yeah, there's drama with Panarin too.
Yeah.
I think the Rangers and the Canucks, they traded JT Miller and Kittle and all of them, but they also traded each other problems. So they're two organizations that are a bit of a mess right now. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, huge mess. And I guess, we'll stay in New York because you mentioned it before. The Islanders win the draft lottery, so they're going to get the first overall pick. But they need to it's crazy because they got the first overall pick in 2009. I don't know if the player is going to make as big of an impact as John Tavares did in 2009, but they're going to get a stalwart defenseman to potentially pair with Noah Dobson on the back end if they don't move him. And now they're looking for a general manager because they decided to move on Lou Lamoriello, and it's great. They need to get younger. They have a nice young nucleus that's a start, right? Callum Ritchie's going to be there. Danny Nelson.
Cole
Yzerman. Schaefer potentially is the first overall pick. Dobson. You have Horvat, Barzell. That's a nice, good start for a team that needed to get younger.
They got very lucky, before the rebuild, they even got first overall pick. So that's something to be happy about if you're an Islanders fan. They didn't even start rebuilding yet, and they already landed a franchise-changing piece, hopefully. But this job became a lot more enticing for the Islander, for a GM, right? But let's just hope they don't make the same mistake. And what I'm hearing and what everyone's hearing is that they're going to go to Ken Holland or Marc Bergevin. That's just trading. You're just trading the age gap from Lamoriello and Bergevin and Holland. These guys don't want to retool. You need a young GM who wants to shape and change an organization, but that's another problem.
Well, so I talked to some people, and they gave me a couple of names that they might not be familiar with. But one is Mark Yannetti out of LA. He's, he worked under Dean Lombardi. He also worked with Mike Futa. They built the championship teams in 2012 and 2014, went to the conference final, helped their, Calder Cup trophy team win a AHL championship in 2015 in Manchester. Those are Mark Yannetti, Futa. Like, those guys they're great amateur scouts. You have to rebuild Bridgeport because Bridgeport stinks. He's got a 38.4% draft success rate. Like, he's got the ability to get this done, Yannetti.
Inherit a team like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Same with Futa. He's there. But again, we'll talk about LA in a minute. Then you have Ross Mahoney, who, by the way, is with the Washington Capitals, who drafted guys like Ovechkin, Backstrom, Holtby, Carlson. Oh, yeah. They won the Calder Cup in 2006, 2009, 2010, 2023. They won a cup in 2018. That's a solid track record. Martin Madden, Anaheim, they've done great jobs in the draft. Like, those are guys that should be GMs and are not. And if the Islanders were smart, they try to plug those guys in instead of going off the Steve Yzerman tree or the Bergevin tree, looking at Darsh, looking at this guy, trying to recycle a GM. I know they want to get a president of hockey ops there, but if you look at those guys that have those track records as scouts and what they've done building a team and getting the player personnel right, those are the type of guys I would want the Islanders to get.
Yeah, and I don't mean to knock on Bergevin because he's had a lot of good along with a lot of bad in Montreal. And you could also make the case that during his time, Montreal the owner, Jeff Molson, didn't want to rebuild. He made it clear.
Right.
So if the ownership waves and says to the GM, you guys could rebuild, we're open to that idea, and then maybe they'll consider. But no, they have to go for someone who's a bit less old school. They've dealt with that for the last decade.
Too long.
Yeah,
too long because
in New York.
So too long since 2018, and after they went to back-to-back conference finals, they should have started the retool process then.
Yeah, and you're getting the chance, to get a first overall pick, to develop your franchise, get some young players in, make it a fun place, fun culture. It's a perfect opportunity to go hire a young, maybe inexperienced or even experienced GM who is open to the idea of rebuilding and development.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what the Islanders need to do because, like I said, Bridgeport sucks. Their roster is awful. One of the worst teams in the AHL. Drafting, developing hasn't been great on the island. And you landed Callum Ritchie at the trade deadline, and then you just stopped and didn't move Kyle Palmieri and or Jean-Gabriel Pageau. Team needs to get younger.
Yeah, they definitely do. And also, I don't think their pick is really set in stone. I think it has to do with, does Dobson want to stay in New York?
Right.
Is Matt Barzal moving? It doesn't mean Schaefer is that guy right now.
I know what the sexy story is. Would be James Hagen's Long Island kid. I just think I don't know how you miss on a guy like Schaefer is going to be your number one defenseman moving forward.
Yeah, and there's even Michael Misa out there. Right?
Yeah,
a good center, but the Islanders it's kind of like when Montreal had first. They didn't really have a consensus number one. It's not like a Bedard year or Celebrini year. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if they play some mind games like Montreal did. I'm sure San Jose would love to get Schaefer at number 2.
Yeah.
Instead of getting another stacked forward to add to their young group. But no, the Islanders' job became a lot more enticing, that's for sure.
Right. And would a job like LA, because of the bright lights and the team that they have, would that be enticing for somebody? Because now we've seen Rob Blake and the LA Kings have mutually parted ways. Kind of was on the hot seat last year because, again, they lost to the Edmonton Oilers, and they did it in dramatic fashion this year because they decided not to play in 2 third periods in games 3 and 4 in Edmonton when they were completely dominating the game and let the Edmonton Oilers back in the series. And now, Rob Blake's out. The future of Jim Hiller is uncertain right now. If you have a new general manager, Luc Robitaille, they're looking for somebody. Do they go
in there again?
Right, because he's an advisor there, I believe, right now with the LA Kings. Do they look at him? Like I said, do they stay with Yannetti, Fuda? Do they go down the Dean Lombardi tree? They have some questions because that got some aging players there that's soon going to have to turn over because, if Quentin Byfield gets that puck out of the zone, that might be a different story. And the LA Kings are probably still playing in the playoffs.
Yeah, and like you said, to answer your first question, it's definitely an enticing place. The city itself, LA, nice beaches, nice city. You're a bit under the radar because you're kind of shadowed by the Lakers and
the Dodgers.
And yeah, and also the fact you're inheriting a good roster, a playoff roster, but with just a kryptonite, which is the Edmonton Oilers. That's their kryptonite, basically. But like you said, there's Drew Doughty. When is his time up in LA? You have Brandt Clark and Jordan Spence just waiting for that 1D opportunity. Same thing with Kopitar. You have Quentin Byfield, who hasn't really gotten a chance to play with the big dogs like Kempe and Fiala. So those are questions that the new GM has to take into account. And I know how much those guys mean to the city, Kopitar and Doughty. But if you looked at the playoffs, Drew Doughty cannot be playing those number 1 minutes.
No, not anymore.
And same thing at the Four Nations. He looked a bit out of place. I'm going to be honest.
I mean, look, he is coming off an ankle injury, so I get it. But the problem is Jim Hiller decided to play 10 players.
Yeah.
He didn't play his depth forward. And then when Brandt Clark and Jordan Spence did play, they produced and scored, but they didn't see the ice that much in the third periods of those games that they lost, which didn't make any sense to me. And his future is kind of uncertain. And, it was interesting to see the quotes coming out of LA. A lot of not surprising to see Rob Blake leave. Players were not surprised by that, which is kind of telling because I guess they kind of knew the writing was on the wall because, the year prior, potentially Blake was on the move.
Yeah. And basically, you can't lose 4 times to the same team.
No.
And the way they lost was the cherry on top. You're up 2-0. You won both games at home. And then
dominating games 3 and 4.
And then game 3, you choke that lead like that. No, that's your sign. Something has to change. You can't just put it all on the players there. That's for sure.
No, exactly. And we'll see if maybe they keep Kuzmenko. He was a nice fit for that team. Hell of a fit. That was a nice acquisition, but they have some work to do with that roster. And so does the Detroit Red Wings. And I think that's where we'll close up shop looking at the Detroit Red Wings because, Steve Yzerman and Dylan Larkin kind of had a battle in the media. Dylan Larkin not too happy about that his general manager did not do much at the trade deadline. And then Stevie Y coming out and said, well, we could have done something. We were willing to move picks and prospects, but there was nothing good enough out there. And then, but I need my best players to be their best down the stretch. Like, there's a lot of contradicting there in my book.
Yeah, I mean, you're telling me you couldn't go get a nice rental for a second-round pick? Kuzmenko went for a third. We just said that, right? Like, but what I find interesting, and I tell a lot of people this, it's like, it must be so frustrating if you're the Detroit Red Wings or the Buffalo Sabres, who have been rebuilding for God knows how long, starving for playoff spot.
Buffalo feels like it's been rebuilding for this is like their sixth rebuild cycle. Detroit's missed the playoffs in 9 years. Buffalo missed the playoffs 14 straight years.
Exactly. So it's like, and then you see a team like Montreal make it off of year 3. Like, I'm sure that's what Dylan Larkin was looking at here. It's like, why are they all going ahead of us when we've been so-called rebuilding all this time along? This year was the year that Detroit had to make the playoffs. Actually, it was the last year they had to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
And they missed by the tiebreaker.
Well, they missed by tiebreaker.
The tiebreaker. But then this year you regress like that, it's completely unacceptable, especially when you go get Alex DeBrincat. But for me, what's the most puzzling part of his tenure has been his free agent signings. Andrew Kopp, JT Compher, Ben Sherratt, the Jeff Petrie trade. These are moves.
Justin Hall.
Not addressing your goalie, Jack Campbell. These are moves that set them back, and it's gonna be a hard time to trade those contracts. That's for sure.
Yeah, and let's add in this past summer. I mean, Patrick Kane's been fine, so if they bring him back on a 1-year deal, it's not a big deal.
Yeah,
because he's played fine. But Vladimir Tarasenko on a 2-year contract, like what's that? Like you can't be making that deal. Like that's just not bad asset management. I know Jake Wallman, you trade him for nothing and he went for a first. Like it's bad. Steve Yzerman's feeling the pressure. You could tell. I watched that press conference.
Yeah.
I saw a man unsure of himself and a man that was feeling the pressure because he was really snippy with the media when they asked him very tough questions and he didn't like the fact that people were calling for his job. And I'm going to be honest, lightning doesn't strike twice. They drafted and developed in Tampa Bay, but they also had Stamkos and Hedman. They don't have that in Detroit.
No. And also he was kind of seen when he got the job as like the savior, this amazing genius GM, and nothing's been showing for it.
No.
I applaud him for the moves he did. The one move I'll give him is Alex DeBrincat. That was an amazing move. But at the end of the day, it's after that. It's beyond that. It's the depth of the team. They're just puzzling moves. I still don't understand giving $16 million to Ben Sherratt with all the
that makes no sense.
Giving $3 million a year to Justin Hall, giving money to Jack Campbell. It's just I'm puzzled. The
trade for Ville Husso, get rid of him. And you're not sure on the goaltending. Nedeljkovic was another guy you trade. Like there's a ton of goalies that they went through. Now Trey Augustin may or may not stay there in Detroit, who is a potential goaltender of your future. There's a lot of puzzling things, and Larkin is mad. And I said it at the beginning of the year when I was talking about the Canadiens playing a meaningful game. I said, all right, I looked at Buffalo's roster. I said Montreal is better than them. And I said I looked at Detroit roster, and I said Montreal is better than them too, because I have not seen much from Detroit to tell me that they were going to take the next step, and they didn't. And I think there's some unrest there because, there's a lot of back and forth between the GM and the captain of the team. But the GM also has to go improve the team. And I know he points to St. Louis and Montreal not doing anything. Doug Armstrong had guys available. The prices were just ridiculously too high. Like everybody in their son was available. Like Binnington was available. There's like a bunch of guys that were available. But the prices were set too high. And oh, by the way, Nick Suzuki basically told Kent Hughes, don't do anything because I believe in the team.
And Montreal weren't really thinking they were making the playoffs. That was not their game plan at the start of the year to make the playoffs. And Detroit was. And St. Louis, you could argue they did make a move. They went to go get Cam Fowler, who had a great first round. But Detroit is you can't compare Detroit and Montreal and Detroit and St. Louis. Detroit's goal is to make the playoffs. And if you're at the deadline and you're right there, they were right there. They were actually in the wild card spot at the deadline.
Yeah, they were.
Why aren't you helping your team get to the finish line?
Like a morale boost, just something that gets you across that line.
And you don't think a Nick Suzuki didn't go up to Kent Hughes to not make a move. You don't think he would have traded those guys away like Savard, Joel Armia. So it's, again, a lack of communication between the GM and his players. That's all it was. And then it comes out badly on the media.
Right. And I know that's what Zibanejad was looking at with Gorton too. He's like, or not with Gorton, with with Drury. He's like, we need more communication. Well, yes and no. To a point you do, but you don't need to know every move that the GM's thinking at all.
No, because then it messes with your mind and the players.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like I said, I think there was a lot of moving parts, and like I said, St. Louis had guys available, and it's just asking prices were just they Doug Armstrong basically pulled the 2019 and threatened everybody to go, and they didn't. So it's just interesting to see how things play out over time, and we're gonna see how it unfolds this summer, because there's going to be a lot of teams looking to do a lot of things. As the Stanley Cup playoffs roll on, there's going to be more news to talk about.
It was a fun season, Jim. It was a very eventful one too, for sure.
Oh, I mean, how many weeks did we come on here and there was something happening, like, just out of the blue?
No, yeah, for sure. It's been a season to remember, and obviously we're not done. We got a whole off season coming up. More podcasts, maybe not as weekly because it gets quiet, but there's a lot of stuff coming up, that's for sure.
No, absolutely. A lot of good things happening here. So Full Press Hockey here weekly. We got the Rumors segment coming back here, our Rumors podcast. Jim Biringer, David Calabretta, up on YouTube, Full Press Hockey. Follow along, watch, like, subscribe to the channel, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Guys, take care. We'll be back.
Barry Trotz, Nashville Predators, making sure you're listening to Full Press Hockey Podcast.